I'm Jack Bradley, in for Steve Lance tonight. A federal court is holding a hearing tonight on the Trump administration's move to deport Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. At the center of this issue is whether officials violated a judge's order in carrying out the deportation. Now, this comes after the Justice Department sent out a request to cancel the hearing. Here's the story.
President Trump on Friday invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged members of Trinidad. A day later, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. blocked the application of the law for 14 days and ordered that any deportation flights that were already airborne turn around. Attorney General Pam Bondi filed an emergency motion on Sunday to pause the judge's order, calling it a massive, unauthorized imposition on the executive's authority. The White House Borders defended the deportations, saying the planes were already over international waters by the time the order arrived, and that President Trump did the right thing to deliver them to El Salvador.
We removed terrorists. That should be a celebration. We removed terrorists from this country, and I stand by what the president did. I support 100%.
Today at the White House, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt was pressed on whether Trump is allowed to defy a court order.
This administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that.
President Trump was asked about criticism that the Alien Enemies Act has only been invoked 3 other times, and all during times of war.
Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. It's an invasion.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Sunday on X that El Salvador agreed to hold the hundreds of alleged gang members in their very good jails at a fair price that will also save taxpayer dollars. Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele posted a video to X on Sunday showing agents leading men in handcuffs off a plane at night and into a prison. The dramatic footage shows men in prison whites with their heads forced down, led roughly by masked prison guards. Prison officials are also shown shaving the prisoners' heads. Bukele says the prisoners were immediately transferred to El Salvador's terrorism confinement center. Trump called those deported bad people.
That was a bad group. When you look at them and you look at the crimes that they've committed, you take a look. You don't get any tougher, you don't get worse than that. You understand that.
The administration agreed to pay El Salvador $6 million to hold the alleged members of Trinidad and MS-13 in prison for a year. The United States has designated both gangs as terrorist organizations. Inmates at the El Salvador jail are permitted to leave their cells for just 30 minutes each day for exercise, during which they remain shackled. They may work in a prison textile factory, but are barred from visitors and phone calls. Each cell contains 2 Bibles for reading. Meals served 3 times daily include rice, beans, tortillas, and eggs, or pastries a few times a week. Prisoners must eat with their hands, as utensils are considered security risks. They receive basic toiletries, a towel, socks, and have their heads shaved every 5 days. El Salvador built the 40,000 capacity facility following record gang violence in 2022. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Despite a judge's order to stop, this deportation appears to be fully legal. Well, we welcome on Hans von Spakovsky, a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, to share his insights. Hans von Spakovsky, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Sure, thanks for having me back.
And the White House is following through with deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act, a law last used during World War II. I want to play this sound bite for you real quick and get your reaction.
No, in fact, this administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that, and we are wholly confident that we are going to win this case in court.
Now, there's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Does President Trump legally have the right to do this?
Yeah, actually, I think he does. This statute, it's a very old statute from 1798, but it's very straightforward. He's followed the rules laid out in it. He has issued a proclamation, in this case, a finding that TDA, this is the Venezuelan criminal gang, that they are a terrorist organization. I think that falls squarely within the statute. And under that statute, once he makes a proclamation like that, he can issue orders. In fact, they call it a warrant, almost like an arrest warrant. The president can actually issue a warrant to federal officers, including the U.S. Marshal Service, to remove aliens associated with his gang from the United States. You know, some will say, well, this isn't a country, it's a terrorist group. But don't forget that the dictator in control of Venezuela, Maduro, actually has been indicted and implicated in narco-terrorism. And in fact, this criminal gang's been involved in the drug trade.
So why is Trump invoking the act now? Like, what exactly is it going to allow here? You described that earlier, but why is Trump utilizing it?
Well, the advantage of this act and this law is that it allows the president to remove the alien immediately and get him out of the country. You know, the regular administrative court processes, the immigration court system that would otherwise apply to an alien can be overridden. And that's why, you know, there are some saying that the president is defying the courts. No, it's actually this federal judge, I believe, who is defying not only the constitutional authority of the president, but is defying this law.
Right, and this judge also temporarily blocked the deportations, ordering that the planes already in the air should return to the U.S. However, the administration stated that 250 Tren de Aragua gang members were already in El Salvador's custody at the time. What do you make of this?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this whole situation is quite something. Look, this is a terrorist organization now, as so designated by the president. And think about the fact that all of these very dangerous gang members, the crimes they were charged with is everything from kidnapping to murder to assault. And yet you have individuals here in the U.S. going to court to try to bring them back and to keep them in the United States. I mean, that is just a situation that I think the American people are going to wholly reject.
Now, it remains unclear when the judge's orders here were issued relative to the timing of the deportation operation. But if the administration violated that order, what legal consequences could it face?
Well, you know, a judge can try to hold, I guess, the officials involved in contempt, but I think that would get appealed very quickly by the Justice Department, which have been very aggressive in these cases. And I think courts of appeal and ultimately the Supreme Court would actually rule in favor of the Trump administration.
Just how extensive is gang activity from illegal immigrants in the U.S., and do the president's actions set a precedent for handling such cases in the future?
I think he is setting a precedent, but if you look very carefully at the executive order that he issued, he goes through in great detail to describe the activities of this particular gang, their involvement with the Venezuelan government, and the basis for declaring them really a terrorist organization. I don't think you're going to be able to do that to, you know, large groups of other aliens who are individually in the country. But for this particular group, this particular criminal gang, I do think it sets a precedent for using this against some of the other dangerous criminal gangs in the world, like the Mexican drug cartels, which are some of the most powerful and most dangerous criminal organizations in the world.
Hans von Spakovsky, thank you very much for your insight here today.
Sure, thanks.
President Trump visiting the Kennedy Center for the first time today after taking it over. It comes as the White House condemns recent bomb threats made against a show at the venue. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the details.
I'm a man of my word. So tomorrow you have the JFK files. I said, just don't redact. You can't redact.
President Trump says he'll release 80,000 pages of unredacted JFK files on Tuesday. The announcement comes as President Trump visits the Kennedy Center in Washington for the first time after making himself the chairman of its board. Leading a board meeting, the president vows to make the Kennedy Center great again as an emblem of the nation.
I thought it was very important to make this good. It's a very big part of the fabric of Washington, D.C.
Meanwhile, the White House today condemned recent bomb threats with suspected CCP links targeting Shenyun Performing Arts at the Kennedy Center. The White House told NTD that any foreign state actors involved will be held accountable.
A few weeks ago, the Kennedy Center got bomb threats targeting a performance by Shenyun Performing Arts, which is an American company showcasing China before communism. This company has been targeted, unfortunately, by the CCP for years. I'm wondering if this administration has a response to this, and also as the president is putting an emphasis on arts and culture, what's the administration's message to potentially foreign state actors who are trying to disrupt that in the U.S.?
Don't disrupt it. This administration will take that very seriously and hold you accountable. We obviously condemn any violence or threats of violence against American institutions. And the president will be traveling to the Kennedy Center later this afternoon. He is now the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, where he hopes to restore arts and culture that embrace American tradition, don't disparage it, as we have unfortunately seen over the past several years.
Shenyun, a classical Chinese dance company based in New York, portrays China before communism and tells stories of the CCP's ongoing persecution of Falun Gong, an ancient spiritual practice. Shenyun's MC says the CCP is escalating its years-long campaign to censor the show, including by threatening not only theaters hosting the show, but also lawmakers supporting Falun Gong.
February 11th, 2025, this was actually sent to the Falun Dafa Information Center. Politicians and congressmen from all countries who support Falun Gong will become targets of attack, and even shooting Trump and driving a vehicle loaded with explosives into the White House are not ruled out.
Despite the fake bomb threats, Shenyun performed at the Kennedy Center with a large audience. It's also set to perform at New York's Lincoln Center in a week. And on Monday, President Trump says Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping will be visiting Washington in the near future. It comes amid high tensions between the two countries over both tariffs and China's role during COVID, which President Trump still often criticizes. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
President Trump is casting doubt on some pardons issued by former President Biden. Trump said yesterday that Biden signed off on the January 6th committee pardons using an Autopen and said that for that reason, they should be voided. An Autopen is a device that replicates signatures. Trump argues that President Biden may not have personally approved or even been aware of the pardons. He alleges that others were responsible for drafting, approving, and signing the documents. In his final moments as president, Biden granted pardons to Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, and members of the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol breach. Now, what are the political implications if those pardons are indeed invalidated? Later on in the show, we'll be joined by Brian Leib. He's the managing director of Henry Public Relations and senior fellow at the Center for Fundamental Rights to break it all down. So stay tuned for that. And meanwhile, Congress is currently in recess with Democratic and Republican lawmakers facing internal criticism over their party leadership. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more on this story.
People feel like this was a moment that was a test for all of our leadership, and not to blink and not to cave. What we saw from Leader Schumer was disorganization on his part.
House Democrats have been vocal about their discontent with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer for his decision to support the Republican funding bill and avoid a government shutdown last Friday.
Please believe many of us did not sleep because we were calling and trying to impress upon the senators the importance of pushing back in this moment. And as you saw, we had all but one Democrat in the House that voted for this.
Some Democratic lawmakers want to move past the funding battle and go on the offensive, while others have left open the question of new Democratic leadership in the Senate.
Tuesday, we'll have a national day of action across the country where all of my colleagues on the House side will be focused on highlighting attention about the devastating impact that a cut to Medicaid like Republicans are planning would harm.
And so the question really is for my party writ large. Are we willing to do the very difficult things necessary to meet this moment?
On the other side of the aisle, some House Republicans have received strong criticism during town hall meetings for their support for the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency.
You don't take away our rights. You don't take our rights. Get off of it. You don't get to do it.
And what I think is important to understand is we live in a democracy, and you should be able to voice your opinion, but you should do it in a respectful fashion, right? It is our job to listen to our constituents.
I think it's important that we get together as a community and talk about the issues that are important to us as a society to make sure that our future generations can enjoy the American dream.
It is worth noting that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was scheduled to have book tour appearances in Baltimore, New York, and Washington, D.C. this week. All three have been postponed due to security concerns. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Now on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan effort is underway to counter the Chinese Communist Party's repression on U.S. soil. This comes as the State Department restricts visas to government officials who cooperate with China. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
House lawmakers have reintroduced 3 bills that would give the Department of Homeland Security more tools to combat foreign governments' attempts to intimidate and silence dissidents. The bills would dedicate personnel and resources to investigate transnational repression, a crime in which China is a leading perpetrator, according to Freedom House, a Washington-based nonprofit. A recent example is several fake bomb threats made to scare audience members attending Shenyun, a performing arts company showcasing ancient Chinese civilization before the Chinese Communist Party took over.
Traditional Chinese culture is really rooted in spirituality, in a lot of traditional beliefs. And those are the things that the Communist Party has been trying to wipe out for decades since they took over. These recent threats that Shenyun has received, these bomb threats, these mass shooting threats, including sexually very violent and graphic threats that targeted female performance members.
Congressman August Pfluger said the hostile acts we're seeing across the country are a direct challenge to our nation's sovereignty and infringe upon American civil liberties. Pfluger is a lead sponsor of the bills to combat transnational repression. Alongside this congressional action, the State Department has restricted visas of foreign government officials who cooperate with the CCP to forcibly return people to China who are subject to torture and persecution at the hands of the regime. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.